Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market, where daily fantasy sports becomes a stock exchange. Download the Jock Market app in the App Store today. Android coming soon. Derek Van Riper here along with Jake Seeley and Brandon Funston getting you ready for week 4 of this fantasy football season. Later in today's show, we'll be joined by Michael Beller. Ed Mallion is back with his latest installment of Brits Picks, and the Athletics' Matt Schneidman will join us to discuss the status of Davante Adams and the rest of the Green Bay pass catchers ahead of their Monday night matchup with the Falcons. We'll take your questions as well. You can send those our way on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. We'll answer those throughout the next 90 minutes. We always begin with the top storylines of the week, and I think week 4 has topped them all, guys. 2 games postponed, 1 removed from the slate entirely, so no Steelers-Titans game at all here in week 4. The other game, Patriots-Chiefs, now looks like it's going to play Monday night. That's sort of minute-to-minute, though, so we'll keep an eye on that situation. And if you were watching the news late last night, you saw that a Saints player had tested positive for COVID-19, but there was some good news earlier this morning. That test was rerun and came back negative. So Lions and Saints is happening as scheduled today. Outside of 2 new positive tests in Tennessee, no other new positive tests around the league per ESPN's Adam Schefter. So with all of that now out of the way, I think we can get started. Let's talk about the Monday Night Madness. We'll go into detail more about the Davante Adams situation with Matt Schneidman later, but this is a situation where Adams is very questionable. Allen Lazard is definitely out after core surgery, and the Falcons receivers are banged up, but all trending towards playing. So, Jake, how are you adjusting to the chaos with this Monday night game having so many key players either out or questionable or at least playing at less than 100%?
Yeah, I think that everything sounds good. Adams practiced Thursday and Friday. Julio has gone through this before and played. But I will say, unless, look, there's 2 things here. Is you want to have a backup option, and there are some options in this game if you want to go to Shepard on the Packers or Zacchaeus on the Falcons, and obviously neither one of them have the upside of what you might start in advance today. But if you want to wait on them and are super worried, you can go pick those guys up. Otherwise, if you know that you just want the safe points, you play it today, because we've seen these situations before, despite what I just said, that we've seen Thursday and Friday practices, despite the fact we've seen Julio be fine. We've also gotten to Monday night before with players in the past, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we didn't like how he looked before the game, and now he's out. So if you can't risk the 0, just play your guys today. If you want to shoot for the upside, because we're talking about top 10 wide receivers, those are 2 really deep names that are going to be out there in most of the leagues. Probably not the same upside, though, obviously.
Yeah, very widely available players. Brandon, anything else you're doing to adjust, especially with the added variable that Patriots-Chiefs, could happen, it's at least scheduled to happen on Monday night. That opens up a few other depth options as well. But I think given the uncertainty around that game, there's no sure thing as far as picking up Demarcus Robinson or depth options available who are on one side of that matchup.
Well, I think Jake said it. You would be picking up the players in the games of the guys you have, like a Davante Adams, a Julio Jones, and you're going for a Zacchaeus and, just whoever's going to fill in. I'm feeling pretty good about Davante Adams, as Jake said, though, with the couple practices in. The one that worries me is even if Julio goes, we've seen him go with that hamstring and he didn't look good. And if they have a full complement, we know that he can just be used as a decoy sometimes. So he's the guy that I'm leery of, but of course, they're all hurt kind of in Atlanta along the starting front. So, it's a tricky one for sure. And I do have some Julio Jones out there, but right now I'm rolling with him, and I'll adjust on Monday night if I have to.
Let's move on to some games on today's slate. DeAndre Hopkins has an ankle injury. Christian Kirk has a groin injury. They're both expected to play against the Panthers. Kirk's usage the first 2 games, maybe a little less than a lot of us had hoped. But, Brandon, it's a great matchup for the Cardinals. I imagine it's as simple as just playing Hopkins once you get the green light that he's active. But are there any concerns here with Kirk or any of the depth receivers not living up to expectations this week against Carolina?
Kirk had consistency concerns and volume concerns and, hierarchy concerns within this passing game before the injury. So, yeah, there was concerns attached to him before, he's on the injury report. I haven't been, I don't have much investment in Christian Kirk. I have no investment in Christian Kirk. That was something I went into the season planning on. So with DeAndre Hopkins, look at it. I've heard it's a pain management thing, and he'll make the call, and I'm sure he's going to play. And if it's a pain management issue, it means it's unlikely that he can hurt himself further, and they can do things for the pain, and adrenaline helps. And this is a guy that's averaging over 10 catches and over 100 or just shy of 120 yards. So is it a 7 catch for 90-yard game? I mean, it's something maybe less, but even if it's a little bit less, you still take it. So with DeAndre Hopkins, I think you just have to play him.
Yeah, we're always left to wonder, though, when you play through something like this, does it become more of a lingering problem as opposed to taking that week off, coming back in a week or two, and then being closer to 100% the rest of the way? Let's talk about the Bengals for a moment. Joe Mixon popped up on the injury report on Saturday with a chest injury. It's looking like he's going to go. We'll get the official word here in about 30 minutes or so. Jake, in the event that Joe Mixon doesn't play, is Gio Bernard an immediately viable option, at least as a flex play this week, given the volume he'd likely pick up?
Yeah, I think that you have to consider that. If he's probably even an RB2 discussion, the problem where I'll steer clear is we've kind of gone down the Geo road before in DFS where he's been like, oh, no Mixon on Mac. And it's a few years ago because I think Mixon last missed the game in 2018 or 2018. But we like smash him in, and then he's still kind of like better Geo and not quite Joe Mixon. So I probably wouldn't go with the whole free space situation. But in a seasonal, if there's no Joe Mixon, you have to start him. I would say he's probably even better than 3 or 4 of the RB2s in my rankings right now, just from the volume standpoint, because there's not, at least at this point from 2 years ago, there's not a lot of competition for those touches. And by the way, I can't answer the questions because Nando picks them, but yes, it is Darkwing Duck for the person asking. Let's get dangerous, of course. So anyway, continue.
It's a great shirt. Brandon, real quick follow-up for you on Joe Mixon, just 3.2 yards per carry through the first 3 games. Getting pretty good volume, though. Not targeted as much in the passing game as I would have expected coming into the year. What do you make of his struggles thus far?
Well, I mean, he has been kind of like a Derrick Henry type where he usually kind of gets into his rhythm in the second half of the season. It can be a little bit up and down early in the year. And, you look at it, it's a new quarterback, and just, to kind of get this whole team's sort of been uneven as it is. This offensive line is a work in progress, to put it nicely. So I'm going to hold as a Joe Mixon investor. I would hold. I don't think it's a time to try to get rid of him. I think the best days are ahead of him. It could start this week, but I don't know what you do, but you just usually have a hard time not being able to put that kind of volume into your lineup on a week in, week out basis.
Got a few questions rolling in. The first one comes from Cody. Is it Robert Woods or Adam Thielen if you're choosing between those two in your lineup? That's a tough call. What do you think, Jake?
It's playing a deeper league.
Yeah.
How do you have to bench one of those guys? Wow. I love Woods against the Giants, so I'll slightly go. This is a coin flip as you can get, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I like about the Rams this week, though, the implied total's right around 30. Like, they're going to get there with a pretty balanced attack. Woods, obviously, is going to get plenty of targets. Like, Woods, Kupp, Daryl Henderson all should get plenty of touches in this game. Grady wants to know, when deciding between receivers that are close in the rankings, would you choose the wide receiver stack with your quarterback? For example, deciding between Marvin Jones, Gallup, Hollywood, with Stafford as his quarterback. So how important is it to connect your receiver to your quarterback when the options might be somewhat similar? Jake's going with the 0. What do you think, Brandon?
0 importance. Yeah, I it's not something that I care about at all. I think you got to look at these players in a vacuum. Who are they going up against? What's the matchup? What is the over-under of the game? What's the expected points? How, maybe take into account if you can imagine how the game script might play out and how that would affect your receiver. So yeah, I'm with Jake. It's not 0, but it's way, way down the list.
Yeah, the key there, of course, still just play the best player. That's the way to go. Trevor wants to know, Anthony Miller value boost. You think there's anything extra there with Anthony Miller now that Nick Foles is taking over at quarterback? What do you think, Brandon?
David Montgomery value boost, Allen Robinson value boost, Jimmy Graham value boost. Yeah, I just think that you look at Nick Foles came in through 3 touchdown passes in 1 quarter. He hasn't been the most steady quarterback in pass. He'll play great for a few weeks and then all of a sudden just throw up a colossal bust. We've seen that a few times, but I think in general you have to feel better about Anthony Miller than you did with Trubisky. I mean, week 1, we saw Miller make a great catch for a touchdown from Trubisky, and there might have been those moments, but I think as far as like just having consistent production, I think you got to feel better about him. I still don't think you're going to get week in and week out consistent production from Anthony Miller.
Yeah, it is just an offense that you feel, I think, better about the floor at least each and every week now that Foles has taken over. We got an update from ESPN's Adam Schefter. The Patriots-Chiefs game will be the early part of a Monday night doubleheader that's now scheduled for a 7:05 start.
Can we just make Monday night doubleheaders a thing? Like, can we all
get rid of Thursday?
Yeah, wipe out Thursday, Monday night doubleheaders. That's what I want. Like, I have no complaints about that plan.
Yeah, that's somebody on the West Coast though that can start the the 9:30, 10 o'clock game and not have to worry about being up at 2 o'clock doing waivers. Thank you very much, Brandon.
Just take a nap in the middle of the afternoon, Jake. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Question there from Charles. So is Travis Kelce good to play now, or should I play Jimmy Graham at tight end? Like, this is really kind of how much do you trust that this game happens as scheduled on Monday night sort of question at this point?
It's a blanket answer. I keep saying everything like this is on the. I'm not trying to be smart. I just like this is on the owners. There's still a risk this doesn't happen. Like they said, they're scheduling it. They said that all the tests come back positive or don't come back positive. They all come back negative. That the Chiefs. I haven't seen the report where they said that the Chiefs have officially done what the Patriots did and had 0 tests. But what if somebody gets tested? They're going to test again tomorrow. Like what if a second player gets tested tomorrow? If you can't afford the 0, I still wouldn't do it. I wouldn't probably go that far with a Kelce to that kind of a level of tight end. But, perfect examples in my home league, somebody's playing Boston Scott instead of waiting for James White. Like that's not that big of a talent disparity there where, just go for it and don't risk the game not happening.
Yeah, I think that's a logical way. Very similar in terms of expected role for those two guys. Thinking about Kelce specifically, I think people look back to previous weeks, sometimes even previous seasons, especially when it comes to that Patriots defense and how they like to try and take away an opposing team's top weapon. The Chiefs have so many weapons to sort of pick your poison, but they did shut down Darren Waller last week. So, Brandon, is there anything you can glean from the recent past matchups with the Patriots trying to slow down this Chiefs offense as it pertains to Kelce or even to someone like Tyreek Hill?
Well, I think, what you always hear about the Patriots and Bill Belichick is, he'll find your best weapon and he'll take him out. So what do you do with the Chiefs? You got Tyreek Hill, you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire now, you got Travis Kelce. I don't think you worry about this too much. This is Travis Kelce. And if you want to play the history card, Kelce's been over 60 yards each of the last 2 times he's played the Patriots. A third time he played them in the playoffs, he had like 20 yards and a touchdown. But so he's made do for fantasy purposes in this matchup. And I think the fact that the Chiefs are you got so multidimensional on offense, you can't really afford to just put all your focus on Travis Kelce. And I don't expect they will. They'll try to do the best they can, but they're not going to draw a bunch of extra, looks on him. I think you're going to have to play this Chiefs defense a little more straight up.
Yeah, I think that's the way it has to be.
For this entire situation, too, just real quick, I tweeted about this, and not everybody has to do it. If you hate it and want to spit at me for it like people did on Twitter, but my home league, what we're doing is you announce you're starting somebody today unless the game gets played, and then you don't have the choice. So, like, if you're you're going to play Greg Ward unless Julian Edelman plays. If Greg Ward scores 40, you don't get to keep Greg Ward if you're saying you're going to play Julian Edelman. So it's a little bit of extra work on the commissioner, but it's an unprecedented season. It's unprecedented time. You don't have to do it. Just a solution out there for people. I've been tossing a couple solutions out. I think the biggest thing too, and I think we'll all agree with this should be the tell that if you didn't listen to us in the preseason and make plans, contingency plans for IR, contingency plans if we get to week 10 and the season gets canceled short and they just go straight to the playoffs, make these plans before it happens.
Yeah, and use the commish tools, but be kind to your commissioner and your league mates. This is very much unprecedented. This is not a fun situation to deal with if you're running a league. It's not worth losing friendships over. I like, by the way, Cody from a little while ago got in there and mentioned that was a work league. That's why he's so loaded. He's just in the league with people who don't know what they're
taking
doing.
Advantage of people you work with.
Well, hey, everyone's got a chance to subscribe and get cheat sheets and do what they need to do, and some people choose not to. That's their choice.
Some people choose not to share it, too. They're like, screw you guys. I'm going to win everything.
Question here from Dr. Max 7. Half PPR. Start Davante Parker or Jeff Wilson Jr. What do you think, Brandon?
You guys have seen what the Seattle secondary has done this year, right? This is I got like 3 different one and done leagues where you can choose a player, you can choose a lineup each week, and once you choose a player, it's done. I have Davante Parker on all 3 of my one and done leagues, so I think Davante Parker is the play here over Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, I like Parker a lot this week. I'm locking him in DFS wherever I can as well. Eagles are really banged up. No Alshon Jeffrey yet this week. No Deshaun Jackson. It looks like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is doubtful. Jason Peters just went on IR. They've had O-line problems all year. Carson Wentz hasn't played very well. Jake, can we safely lower the expectations for this offense? Can we stop expecting them to bounce back to their form from 3 and 4 years ago at this point?
I think 100% you can, and mostly because it comes down to Carson Wentz and his play so far. And now you got 3 terrible matchups for the next 3 weeks. I don't know how you even roster him at this point. Now watch him go through 300 and three touchdowns to these no names. But Greg Ward's back to being relevant. I think Greg Ward is a wide receiver 4, potentially could finish even higher than that. If you're looking for the Deshaun Jackson type, it sounds like Hightower should be fine because he came back to practice after missing Thursday. So there's your boom bust guy. But I keep saying this is like, if you held on to, or if you just grab Boston Scott because you're needy, not saying it's definitively going to happen, but this is the scenario late last year when Miles Sanders was a top 10 running back and Boston Scott was top 15, top 20, because they were in the same scenario. But last year they had Goddard. Now they don't even have Goddard. So I think Boston Scott becomes really relevant, and so does Greg Ward.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup on Sunday night because it's not going to be as good as I would have thought back when the schedule came out. We do get George Kittle back on the San Francisco side, and Deebo Samuel should be back as well. Jordan Reed is now on IR. Still no Jimmy Garoppolo or Raheem Mostert this week. You know, Brandon, I think Kittle's a lot like the DeAndre Hopkins situation from earlier. As long as he's officially active, he's in and fine. But do you take more of a wait-and-see approach with Deebo Samuel? I'm thinking about some of the stuff I've seen from inside injuries and the concerns that he might not be fully healed quite yet. So what do you do with Deebo in places where you've been stashing him?
Yeah, I don't think you mess with him at all. This is a good wait and see approach, as you said, and I think it could be a decent game, another decent game for Brandon Ayuk. But the thought process could be that Deebo out there again. I mentioned that decoy thing. He could be, the threat of him there makes the defense have to look at him. That could help things out for Kittle and Ayuk. But I would expect he's going to be on a limited snap count. They're probably not going to use him too much. I don't think they're going to fully immerse him into the offensive game plan. So I would not start him. But Ayuk, I think he's a decent play today.
Jake, I want to talk about the Broncos just for a moment. Noah Fant obviously played on Thursday night against the Jets, but he suffered an injury. He's unlikely to play in Week 5. If you're looking at some free agent tight ends now to get ahead of the curve because you get the free adds and drops up until lock today, is there anybody on the wire right now that you'd go get now before you have to wait and pay fab dollars to pick up that player?
For tight end specifically, is that what you're asking?
Yep.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure because of the other situation there. I think the big one that's still out there in a ton of leagues is Logan Thomas, because a lot of people have dropped Logan Thomas because he really hasn't paid off yet. He's still getting the second most volume on this team. Steve Sims is out. And if you're talking about what's been left on the field, and not all because of his fault, but he has some of the highest expected fantasy points that hasn't produced so far at tight end. If you're going even deeper than that, you can go back to the game that we're playing the Monday night. There is the Green Bay. Robert Tonyan is like somebody that's talked about on this site, somebody that's been talked up a lot before and just is finally starting to hit. And if you need to go to the Packers, there's another one for you.
Yeah, I mean, with Lazard's injury, someone's going to pick up the slack, even if Davante Adams is back out there. And I think Robert Tonyan kind of leads the.
Is Kumaro still on the team picking up the slack? It's just Shepard now. So, by the way, completely weird spelling, not like the 10th spelling of Shepard that we've seen in the NFL, just to make sure if you're searching him.
Yes, that is key. Oscar says, good morning from California. Thank you for your help. In a PPR league, choose 2 to flex: Devontae Parker, Mike Davis, Mark Andrews, and Jerick McKinnon. Let's go to you, Brandon.
I feel like I'm looking over the board at this. Yeah, I think in a PPR league, I talked about Devontae Parker and that juicy matchup against Seattle. And then look at Mike Davis has like 16 catches in 5 quarters. And Joe Person, the Athletics Carolina beat writer, said that they don't think that Teddy Bridgewater is going to stop just dumping the ball off to Mike Davis. That's going to be a regular part of not turning the ball over. And so in a PPR setting, you have to go with those guys. But, man, I like all of those guys. I really think Jerick McKinnon is going to have a nice day, and I think Mark Andrews is going to have his best week of the season so far.
It's a really tough call with plenty of good options in that one.
I wasn't even laughing at the question, but every time I hear Joe Person, I think of Bird Person from Rick and Morty.
Yeah, I do too. Big fan. Scrub wants to know full PPR pick 2 from Montgomery, Gurley, Cooks, and Justin Jefferson. Man, what a game from Justin Jefferson last week. What do you think about this one, Jake?
I think everybody wants to get Jefferson in there, and I understand it, but it's a rookie. He's being asked to be played outside. If you want to have fun, start Jefferson. You just picked him up probably. If you want to have fun, it's him. But in that situation with those two running backs, that's where I'm going on that one. I don't feel like you need to risk Jefferson, but hey, he's got the ceiling of all of them, but I would go with the two running backs.
You could stack Vikings this week. You could get Jefferson in there. Thielen's going to be pretty popular. Throw in like a cheap dart like Irv Smith or something if you're in a big field tournament. Throw Cousins in. He's going to be min-owned, basically. Hopefully they can just keep pace with the Texans' offense if you're going that route. That's your have fun option, right? Take $10 and throw a dart in a tournament like that. Brett wants to know, flex Chark, Hunt, or Marquez Valdez-Scantling in a half-point PPR league, and Brett needs upside. Where does he get upside here, Brandon?
I think Kareem Hunt is the guy for me, and I really like him in this matchup against Dallas. And Kareem Hunt is game script agnostic. They get blown away. Kareem Hunt will be in there a lot, but they use him around the goal line regardless. And I think you worry a little bit about the injury, but you have to worry a little bit about that with DJ Chark as well with the chest injury. The nice thing is these guys are going to be early games, so you'll know right away whether you can use Hunt or Chark, and if you can use both of them. I'll take Hunt. What's that?
You didn't do with Chark. You have to.
I kind of got burned out on that last year. I pretty much have moved on.
But we can let Russ cook 7,000 times, but we're pissed off.
This is the year of let Russ cook. Last year was
who, by the way, if you want Russell Wilson, he was catching passes in pregame warm-up. So there you go. Ooh. PPR points too.
Maybe a little throwback to the quarterback. I like that.
Let's go to the Saints. They've got injury trouble still. Michael Thomas was ruled out on Friday. Jared Cook also ruled out. So I think that leads us to a question about Adam Troutman. Is there any deep league appeal there or DFS appeal as it pertains to the Saints' temporary starter at tight end? What do you think of Troutman, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, he's a rookie, so you worry about that, but he has some potential. I just worry that this could just mean 20 catches for Alvin Kamara. No Michael Thomas, no Adam Troutman. I just think it could be something like that. So, but there's risk attached to it. Obviously, it's not a slam dunk as Jared Cook is now that he's filling in for him. Is he, borderline top 20 tight end rank for me? I could see that. You could justify that, but it's still, I think it's a deep pull if you have to go Adam Troutman this week.
Now, the Saints are without Marshawn Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins as well, Jake. How much of a boost did you give Stafford and Galladay and Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson with that news?
Mostly Stafford, a little bit to Galladay. Galladay was already high. Marvin Jones got a little bit of a bump too. I think that it was surprising that he wasn't more involved without Galladay. So you kind of hope that's like one of the offsets, the big guys next to you, so you can get open a little bit more. Hawkinson, I'm kind of just leaving. Hawkinson's target percentage didn't really go up without Galladay, and it's really not changed with Galladay. He's it just seems like Stafford's going to use him as he uses them. So he's a little bit touchdown based for a tight end one, which is frustrating.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's talk about the Bucs backfield where Leonard Fournette was ruled out, and we never really trust Ronald Jones, but this seems like a pretty good spot for him with the Bucs being home, being favored. Brandon, do you trust Ronald Jones enough to play him as a RB2 or at least a flex play with confidence? I mean, what's your actual trust level in this spot given the history that we've seen with Ronald Jones and Bruce Arians?
Yeah, but now what? Now, Leonard Fournette's out of the picture for the week. I think the trust level is a lot higher. He's looked good in spots this year. And, whether Keyshawn Vaughn is active, I just don't think there's going to be as much of a backup role potential for him as it was between Fournette and Jones. So I think you mentioned it, RB2 flex. I think he's kind of on that border of those two. So I think you can play him with relative confidence in at least volume being like something in the mid-teens plus. And with that kind of volume that, and this is a pretty good offense, might get a chance for a touchdown out of it as well. I think you can feel decently confident about him today.
Keep an eye on our scroll at the bottom as inactives and more news comes in. We'll be sure to update that. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport is reporting that DeAndre Hopkins will play. The official inactives list should be out in about 5 minutes or so we'll be sure to get that once we have it. Kyle wants to know, is Jameson Crowder a legitimate starter after his week one and what he did on Thursday night? It's a 12-team PPR league competing with Chark and Tyler Boyd for 2 spots. What do you think about Crowder going forward, Jake?
No question. I had Chark in the mid to upper 30, somewhere around there in the 30s for the Thursday night game. only because I didn't know how healthy he was. If you would have told me he's playing the entire game and looked like he did, I'm not talking about the performance. I'm just talking that he looked healthy. I would have had him probably close to the top 25. It's volume. It's what I said in the preseason. This isn't a victory lap, but it kind of is the fact that he's the other version of Terry McLaurin. He's got a questionable quarterback, a questionable offense, but he's getting targets on top of targets on top of targets. And Terry McLaurin and Jameson Crowder are very similar. He's discount Terry McLaurin, and that puts him inside the top 25.
Would love to see Jameson Crowder end up on a contender this season. That would be kind of nice. Chase wants to know, with the Pats-Chiefs news, Ayuk over Edelman. What do you think, Brandon?
You know what? I'm okay with that. I actually think Ayuk's going to have a decent game. You got a changeover at quarterback plus a game hanging in the balance. That's not a bad pivot. And I'm not saying I probably would do this. I don't know how you feel about that, Jake. I don't know. I'm a little bit leery about that. There's a little bit of potential double whammy there with Jarrett Stidham and with the, game.
Brian Hoyer.
Or Brian Hoyer, sorry.
Yeah. And Brian Hoyer can quarterback. I'm fine with Julian. Like, the only reason I would go with Ayuk is if you don't want to risk the zero, like we talked about earlier in the show. But I'll take Edelman every single time, mostly because Debo's back and Ayuk replicates Debo. That's my concern, is who's staying on the field. I think Kendrick Bourne stays on the field, and that's my concern, is what's the snap count for Ayuk. But of course, we don't even know what the snap count for Debo is. So I just think there's a lot of risk in that game.
I don't think Debo's going to play that much, and I don't think he's going to do that much.
I don't know. If they took their time and then they call them back active this week. This kind of feels like, why? Like, why wouldn't you just hold them out one more week if you took all this time?
It's a fair point, right? I mean, they've got the luxury of, I think.
I'm not saying I know. I'm just saying this is the things you have to consider, is we don't know. That's my concern.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the more difficult things to project.
I see the next one. I am not trusting Jimmy Graham in any league yet. He needs to do it like at least another week or two before I start throwing Jimmy Graham out there.
The first three are pretty solid there. So
no, you got MVS in there. Would you would go with Fuller over MVS? With no Lazard, I'm going MVS.
I think Deshaun Watson's going to have I think he's going to have a big week. So I would go with Fuller. I know he hasn't been completely healthy, but he's a go. I'll go.
Enjoy your 20 or 2 points.
I don't know that Jimmy Graham and MVS, they're kind of from the same family of just, the trust factor with these guys. MVS, how many times have we thought MVS is going to have a big game and he gives you nothing?
That's certainly fair. It just like I said, Will Fuller, enjoy your 20 or your 2. Those are your outcomes.
Against the Vikings, though, like, Will Fuller should have a huge game today. I love Fuller this week.
I brought this up. Brandon knows this. I talked about it on either the rankings show or the waivers show. The Vikings were still iffy last week, but they started to show semblance of turning the corner, at least against the passing game. Derrick Henry obliterated them, but they were starting to show some semblance of an NFL defense. I'm not saying it's changed 100%, but I'm just like this defense could be something by week 7, where we're not just saying smash everybody against the Vikings.
All right, I'll level with that. That's a very reasonable statement by week 7. But here we're in week 4. I want Will Fuller. DFS season long. I want Will Fuller this week.
But Fuller burned you when you trust him. That's my concern.
That's MVS.
Actually, I'm off. I'm off on Fuller, so you should plug him in all your lineup. So there you go.
Always fade Jake whenever possible, right? If Jake
on Fuller
away from a player on Fuller,
no, on Fuller and on Jared Cook. When I trust both of them, don't play him. When I trust either or when I don't, then you smash him in there.
All right. Hey, my instincts were right. We're thumbs up on Will Fuller this week. One other question for you with the Bucks, Jake. Chris Godwin is also out again this week. Scotty Miller's a little dinged up. We'll see what his status is in just a minute. Do you think we'll see a little more going to the tight ends, both Gronk and O.J. Howard, given the state of that receiving core?
I think that you could maybe see a little bit of what we saw last week. I mean, they do run a lot of 12 with them. It's tough to trust either, especially with Gronk, because he's not still seeing even a massive snap count. The Scotty Miller news earlier, like you said, it hasn't been official, but it was announced about an hour ago that he's likely to go, but he's not 100%. Justin Watson, I thought was intriguing. I had Justin Watson inside the 40s before Scotty Miller was announced as he's probably going to play. So now that kind of moves both of them into the same range, in my opinion. It's going to depend on who's outside, who's in the slot, how many snaps. And I'm not trying to mess with either one of them unless I'm looking for a Hail Mary play. I don't love Gronk, but if you gave me like a flex situation, I would actually go Gronk or O.J. Howard before starting to play either one of those two, unless you're just looking for the complete boom bust home run play.
Let's go to the situation in Oakland, or Las Vegas, rather. I'm going to do that probably until like 2025. Henry Ruggs, doubtful with knee and hamstring injuries. Bryan Edwards already out. Brandon, is it Hunter Renfrow time? Do you trust him to get volume this week against the Bills?
Yeah, I do. And he was, he had volume last week with these guys out, 9 targets, 6 catches, 84 yards, touchdown. Finished the year strong. When he gets the volume and it's only Darren Waller as that kind of like the other main option. You can feel good about him with Derek Carr. Derek Carr liked those slants and the kind of work in the middle of the field, and that works out well. But you got Buffalo. You look at what Jameson Crowder and Cooper Kupp have done this year, working the slot. Like they've fared very well. So really, I think Hunter Renfrow probably is looking as good this week as he will look most any week this year. So if you have him, I think you roll him out there.
Definitely an option if you're looking for some help at receiver. Probably scooped up in a decent number of leagues on waivers earlier in the week, but in some more shallow formats might still be out there. Terry McLaurin is questionable. We should have a word on him very soon. Steven Sims is out. Jake, I noticed we're starting to get some rumblings that Dwayne Haskins might not be safe as the starter in Washington. This seems like a pretty unfair shake given the lack of quality around him. It just seems impossible to succeed with this supporting cast. I mean, it's McLaurin and just a bunch of guys trying to find their footing. You mentioned Logan Thomas earlier. I know you like him and the way he's been used, but is there any hope at all for this Washington offense to figure some things out, being huge underdogs and having to deal with that Ravens defense this week?
Yeah, so real quick, not know while you're listening, Joe Mixon is active. John Ross is inactive again. So there's your T. Higgins. With this entire situation here is wait, which team were we talking about? I just confused myself.
Talking about Washington.
I know. I confused myself with that when I was going to start talking about Joe Burrow. But in any case, like the Dwayne Haskins thing, I'll say something that like Emery said. This is quoting Emery. He said, like, we're going to start questioning Dwayne Haskins about being benched, and how are we not doing the same with Daniel Jones? So that's the situation there. Is like it's unfair, both of these teams. I mean, you can make the argument no Saquon Barkley, no offensive line. But Haskins, the one thing about right now, the only thing is it's Terry McLaurin's show and Logan Thomas. And after that, until Dwayne Haskins, my biggest concern as a fantasy player going into the season, and we've talked about on many of these shows, is he ever going to get to the volume where he's not Tannehill, where he's Tannehill in the fact of 220, 250 yards at best, but without that touchdown efficiency, it's going to kill us as fantasy players. So this entire offense kind of out on, I think we're just McLaurin, Gibson, and Logan Thomas until further notice. And if the quarterback change does happen, similar to Herbert with the Chargers, it could actually help for fantasy as much as I would love to see Haskins get a full season.
Yeah, this is just an ugly situation right now in Washington. So I would agree with you. It's mostly just McLaurin for me. Thomas, I like the usage, but I hate this offense so much that I don't want to play him because I feel like the floor is lower than it should be for someone getting that much work. Brandon, let's talk about the Seahawks running back situation where both Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde are considered game-time decisions this week. How is this going to play out? Looking at how these guys were involved in practice over the course of the week, do you expect them both to play, or do you think they're going to be a little bit shorthanded at running back?
I don't know about Carlos Hyde, but I feel very good about Chris Carson. He had some good practices this week. Just kind of hearing about that injury, it sounds like this is another thing where it was more pain than anything else. Little chance of a re-injury of the actual injury he had, which didn't sound like it was that extensive. It looked worse than it was. So I think Chris Carson is going to kind of be normal, and you might get a little bit more Travis Homer or even DJ Dallas active if they don't have Carlos Hyde out there this week. But I don't know that you're going to want to go any deeper than just playing Chris Carson. If you have, I don't think there's any play here with Travis Homer. He could do something, but I think it's still too risky. I think Chris Carson is going to be business as usual.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are chasing the Seattle passing game in DFS, so Carson might actually be a nice contrarian play. Still get exposure to that offense, and you get someone who's a lot lower rostered than Wilson and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Kareem Hunt officially active. That was looking pretty good as of Friday. Earlier in the week, he wasn't practicing. He's been dealing with a groin injury, so that extra nudge that we all wanted to give Nick Chubb if Kareem Hunt is out, it's not there, at least for this week. But that Browns-Cowboys matchup should be a nice shootout for us.
Tyron Smith active for the Cowboys. That's a big help to their offensive line.
Yeah, big boost for them. And Mike Williams, Tyrod Taylor, both out for the Chargers. We knew that coming into the week. We'll get to a few more questions here. in just a few minutes. A couple things we want to talk about coming off of last week's news. Devonta Freeman's had another week to practice with the Giants. It was Dion Lewis taking the bulk of the touches for them last week. Over under 45.5 total yards for Devonta Freeman this week, Jake. Is he at all useful in this offense with the volume you expect him to get?
Total yards, I'll give slight over, mostly because of the pace. This is top 5 combined pace on both sides of the ball with the Giants and the Rams. And the Rams aren't a great matchup, and that's why I hesitate a little bit to say the combined over. But you look at last week's game, he was involved. He was involved almost the same amount as Lewis and Gallman, which we kind of knew going into that game. There was going to be concern of it's Lewis, is it Gallman? The answer is neither. Like the fact that you got Freeman off the street, who he himself said he wasn't in game shape. There was reports that he didn't look in game shape. You watch the game and he still did not look 100% as in like shape. So you see all that, and they gave him touches and they gave him almost the same amount of work. It feels like they're going to go to Freeman. And now is he going to get 20 touches? Probably not. But if you gave me 12 to 14 in this pace of a game, I'll take the slight over.
Yeah, pace is huge here, and I think the Giants are going to be just chasing all day. They're 13.5-point underdogs. I actually like Daniel Jones stacked up with 3 pass catchers, though, as they try and find a way to put some points on the board. On the other side of this one, Daryl Henderson, over under 88.5 total yards this week, Brandon. It seems like he's in a great spot game script-wise to get another run at 20 carries.
Yeah, 20 carries last week, caught a ball. He hasn't been quite as active in the passing game as I expected he would be, but maybe we'll see that a little bit more. Giants have been pretty bad against running backs in the passing game, but right now, still no Cam Akers back, and this is kind of turning into Daryl Henderson's backfield in the meantime. Cam Akers better hurry up and get back if he wants a piece of it. But I think we've seen him go over this the last 2 weeks, and I don't think it's going to change against the Giants. I'll take the over on Daryl Henderson.
Let's go to the Bears quarterback situation. We talked about Nick Foles bringing up the floor for the offense a little bit, but Foles himself as a fantasy commodity, what do you think here, Jake? Is he a top 15 quarterback in week 4?
No. I have him just like Bella was excited when we did the ranking show that I had him like at QB 21. They're facing the Colts. Let's go crazy here in perception of what Foles is. Like Foles better than Trubisky, sure, especially with how Trubisky was playing. Still Nick Foles, this is still one of the worst matchups. Like the Colts defense is a top 5 defense. Their outside corners have been terrific so far. It's actually a little bit of a concerning matchup for Allen Robinson. Not that you're benching Allen Robinson, not that you're fading this game, but to immediately go and say, start everybody on the Bears, they're facing the Colts. Like the Colts should be in the conversation of what we think about when we say facing the Ravens, facing the Steelers. Like that's where they deserve to be at this point.
Yeah, that Colts team, I'm bummed they keep just getting destroyed by injuries, and Phillip Rivers just doesn't look good. It's really changed my expectations for that offense as a whole. It's kind of Jonathan Taylor and not much else, maybe some Mo Alley Cox in DFS occasionally in season long, but largely an avoid given all the injuries they have been dealing with.
To go back real quick, the Chris Carson thing, Carlos Hyde is inactive.
Inactive, yeah.
It's a great spot for Chris Carson.
Yeah.
Really like him this week. Next one here, we got Zach Moss back in the fold for the Bills. Who has more PPR points this week, Brandon? Zach Moss or Devin Singletary?
I think it's Singletary. And Singletary, I think what he did last week with the 120 yards, he had a very nice game. I think that's going to lead the Bills to kind of lean on the hot hand a little bit more. Again, I don't think Zach Moss being out with the toe injury is going to come in and fall right back into an even platoon split. Maybe he gets a goal line carry and people get annoyed by that. But I think the decided touch advantage this week is going to be with Singletary again. And it's a great matchup against the Raiders, who have been absolutely terrible against running backs so far. So I think Singletary is a solid play, and Zach Moss, we might see him sprinkled in a bit, but I don't think this is going to be like we saw in week 1 and early in the year when these guys were kind of interchangeable.
Got a few more questions rolling in. Jacob wants to know in a half PPR league, James White or Chase Edmonds as a running back this week. What do you think here, Jake?
I'd say James White, but that goes back to the conversation from before. James White, if you have a backup option, even if it is Rex Burkhead or somebody else in that game, Damian Harris is out for this week, so somebody in that game as a backup plan. Otherwise, you kind of have to go with Edmonds.
It's such a great matchup for the Arizona running backs. It is tempting to nudge Edmonds in, at least in those deeper leagues. Marky Mark 151 writes, "Hey all, 0-3 start. Been without Kittle, A.J. Brown, Thomas, Akers, and others start the year in 14-team league. Running backs are currently Davis, Ingram. You stashed Akers and Hill. Would you move Thomas for a stud RB +1?"
Why is Nando giving like a novel on Sunday morning? Thank you for this.
He just wiped Brandon completely off the screen.
That's how long that
Brandon's
question
invisible.
was. I had to pull myself up over the fence there.
I mean, I think you can do that. Like, yes, you could trade Michael. You're 0-3. You got to start making some moves that are.
The question is,
aggressive at
can
this
you
point.
really trade Michael Thomas for a stud RB +1?
I think you can. He almost came. He almost came back this week. I think that people will still pay it. You go for the 3-0 teams. I'd do it if I was 3-0 in a heartbeat.
Yeah. It depends on your definition of a stud. I mean, if it's one of the top 7 running backs,
Oh, of course not. Yeah. Well, you're not doing that probably even if it's healthy.
How far are you extending the stud definition is the question on that. So
I'd say RB1s. Like I would think, down to the concernings of Chubb being split every single week. But I think that might be of a straight up Chubb for Thomas.
The Chubb, Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake range kind of area.
Yeah, you might be able to get Drake plus something, I would say. That seems pretty
Drake,
reasonable
especially because he hasn't done a whole lot. So you could probably get Drake plus a decent, a sweetener in that one.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trading with
Splenda?
a 3-0 team, they probably got some found money on that roster. Is it decent?
Something non-artificial, Jake. Sugar in the raw.
The next question comes from Srikanth. It's Andy Isabella, Mecole Hardman, or Robert Tonyan. Start 1. Who do you choose out of that group, Brandon?
Oh, man. I think maybe Isabella, who's not getting a whole lot of run, but Christian Kirk is not 100%. DeAndre Hopkins not 100%. Maybe you get a little extra Andy Isabella, and a little extra Andy Isabella is a good thing for fantasy. So I'll say Isabella and roll the dice there.
All right, one more question here from Ashton. Full PPR, wait or hope for James White tomorrow, or play Zach Moss today? All of my other running backs are out injured or postponed. What do you think, Jake?
I think in this case, you go with Zach Moss just to not afford the 0. I would love to wait on James White, but let's be realistic about it too. Is James White from his time off, you would assume they just throw him back in there and say, go for it. And Brian Hoyer, maybe a little bit of a boost, but with how Burkhead's looked for these past 2 weeks, maybe it's not the full James White anymore.
Yeah, they could ease him back in if they want to, just given how well Burkhead has played. Let's talk about a few matchups. Jake, you write a column every week, adjusted points allowed, looking for the absolute best matchups on the board. A couple that pop at the quarterback position, the Packers, the Bengals, and the Dolphins. Now, there's been a lot of love for Ryan Fitzpatrick. We'll talk about him in a few minutes. I want to talk about the Bengals and Joe Burrow. You wanted to talk about him before, so the floor is yours. How much do you trust Joe Burrow to sort of put it together against the Jags this week?
So, like I've been kind of the low man on Joe Burrow to this point, and 2 really good games. So I understand the excitement behind it. And the Bengals. The problem is I don't know which way this is going to go. And I'm not saying like, hey, whatever, but this is part of like the process of making your own decisions here. I do have Joe Burrow as a top 15 quarterback, but why isn't he higher? The problem is the pace for the Jaguars is bottom 5. They grind down the clock. And if you see similar to the Thursday night game where James Robinson gets a rushing touchdown or 2, yes, their defense is susceptible. But if we're talking about slow and now we're talking about 40-something plays instead of 50-something, that's a big difference. And, Mixon is out there. Williams was inactive, it sounds like. So that sounds like Mixon's fine. The concern is that just you won't have the volume of 30-plus attempts. You would assume that he would, but that's why I don't put him as a QB1 yet. There's still concern there.
One other Bengals-related question real quick. A.J. Green has been getting volume target-wise. Just hasn't turned it into production. T. Higgins has taken on a larger role. Who do you trust more at this point between Higgins and Green?
Neither. No, because it comes down to Joe Burrow. Like last week was Higgins. The week before that was the tight ends. Week 1 was A.J. Green. And Tyler Boyd's been the only consistent option. Brandon knows this. I mentioned on the ranking show, Joe Burrow, to something that Emery brought up a while ago. I said the same thing. He has the better word for it. It's the point and shoot offense. You let Burrow just find the open guys. And one thing he's doing as a rookie and one thing he's going to continue to do is he finds something that works and sticks with it. That's why you see so much game to game to game. All 3 games have been very different. The targets haven't been the same for Green in week 3 as they were in week 1. He went to Green a ton, the tight ends a ton, and now T. Higgins a ton. I'm not saying like it's not going to be Green this week? Because we don't know. He's going to find what works and sticks with it. The only consistent option is Tyler Boyd.
Well, let's move on over to the running back position for adjusted points allowed. The Cardinals, the Bills, the Vikings, the Falcons among the teams that popped this week with good matchups for running backs. Brandon, as you think about those teams, I mean, obviously Dalvin Cook's a guy that's in lineups. There's nothing to really think too much about there. But how do you try and leverage that, knowing that? We talked about Chase Edmonds kind of in passing before. Is there some deep league appeal for him or anybody else with some of those great running back matchups?
Yeah, I think there's some deep league appeal for Chase Edmonds. I kind of was thinking about that earlier this week, and with the injuries to the wide receivers, could this be a game where Arizona gets a lead and they just going to lean? I think this is going to be a really good game for this backfield and as a whole. And Edmonds is more involved in it than probably a lot of people thought he would be. But I think the tricky one here is Todd Gurley, because he's kind of become like a Jordan Howard, a past Jordan Howard, where he's just not using the passing game at all. And that's just been a big departure from what we've seen with him with the Rams. And if this game gets out of control for the Falcons and Aaron Rodgers is just dealing on Monday night, it could be a Brian Hill game. Could be not a whole lot there for Todd Gurley, because they've had to go to the hurry up offense, go to a chase the scoreboard kind of a situation. So I think Todd Gurley, you look at Green Bay and how generous they've been to running backs, this might be one where he's maybe not as high up on the list as you probably think he should be.
Yeah, Kenny Clark could be back this week for the Packers. It'll change a lot about their struggles against the run as well. Let's take a look at the receiver matchups. The Dolphins, we've been talking about them all week with that matchup against Seattle. They really pop. Houston and Tennessee also getting lifts, unfortunately, with the Tennessee game being postponed. That's not going to be there. But let's talk about Houston for a minute. Like Will Fuller, you're out on him this week, Jake. Are you in on Brandon Cooks? Because I saw him in the mid 4,000 range on DraftKings, and that's a crazy low price.
Yeah, I'm not completely out on Will Fuller. You talk about DFS, I am, because Fuller's going to be chalky, and so now he does have to have his 20-point plus game, which certainly can happen. But that's why for the price, that if you want a piece of this and you want that similar upside, I have been pivoting to Brandon Cooks, because you're getting a discount and you're also fading the chalk in that game. So I'm not out on Fuller for seasonal, and it's kind of more tongue in cheek, the frustrations of Fuller. He should hit this week and he should have a big game, but this is why in DFS, if you're looking for a tournament play, this is where you go to a Brandon Cooks.
Now, everybody likes Devontae Parker, I think, at least relatively speaking, this week, given that matchup. Who else do you like in that group of Miami pass catchers this week, Jake?
Preston Williams. That's a great option too if you're going to this game, because everybody remembered at the beginning of the season and drafts, everybody's like, well, I don't like Devontae Parker as much because we saw what Preston Williams did before he got hurt. And then people were like, well, even if you like Parker, still go get Preston Williams, because look at what he did before he got hurt. And then Preston Williams starts off slow, and all of a sudden like, yeah, we want nothing to do with him anymore. And now everybody loves Fitzpatrick today. Everybody loves the Dolphins offense, because why wouldn't you? As Brandon has mentioned multiple times. Well, this is very similar to Brandon Cooks. Go get Preston Williams while everybody's on Parker. If they both hit, good. If Parker somehow surprisingly has a mediocre day and Williams hit, you're going to be up on everybody else.
Let's take a look at the tight end matchups real quick. The Lions, the Packers, and the Cowboys are among the teams that really stand out as having great matchups this week. A lot of love for TJ Hawkinson in the DFS community. They're definitely a good season-long play there. What are you doing with those other two teams? Are you finding a way to get some boosts in your lineup from the Packers or from the Cowboys at tight end this week?
Yeah, it just seems so crazy with Dalton Schultz. Is he really getting targets? But yeah, he had another 6 targets last week after kind of filling in for Jarwin and getting the 88 yards in the big game a couple weeks ago. He goes 448 last week. That's definitely doable and a great matchup. I guess if you were in on Dalton Schultz last week, there's no reason you shouldn't be again this week. TJ Hawkinson, I think people that drafted TJ Hawkinson are definitely rolling him out there. If it's a good matchup, you felt good about him in previous weeks already. He's kind of come through, so no reason to hold off. And then Tanyan in Green Bay is a guy. I know Jay Sternberg stepped up a little bit last week, but Tanyan scored both weeks. He's given you something each of the last 2 weeks, and it is a good matchup. And he is the, I guess he's the safe, not so safe, but viable fallback if you are waiting on Travis Kelce come Monday night and things go awry. So, Tanyan is there waiting if needed.
Yeah, a handful of decent options on the waiver wire at tight end if you're scrambling. We've reached the point in our show where we say goodbye to Jake. Before we say goodbye to Jake, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before you go? Any other week 4 observations that we didn't get to?
No, just make sure, like I said, I want to hammer that point home from earlier, is make sure you make these plans so you don't have week 7 pop up and 4 teams on a bye and we don't know what to do about COVID. Like, make these plans ahead of time. Or you're just going to get everybody pissed off.
All right. Well, enjoy week 4, Jake. We
right,
appreciate everything you brought to the show yet again. We'll say goodbye to Jake. Be sure to get all of Jake's updated rankings, his waiver column, matchups, everything you need every week this fantasy football season for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. That gets you regular football coverage. It gets you MLB playoff coverage, everything we do, including soccer coverage. We're going to start looking for some help on the waiver wire if you are scrambling because of cancellations. Ed Mallion is here to help out with his latest installment of Brits Picks. Let's talk to Ed about some of his favorite replacements. We're looking for help, and we're going to start at the quarterback position, Ed. We're looking for a widely available quarterback who can actually do some damage this week. Maybe you're missing Ben Roethlisberger or Ryan Fitzpatrick, and you're just not sure what to do on the wire. Where should you turn?
Well, yeah, it's a COVID emergency day, but as the guys have kind of said, Ryan Fitzpatrick might be the player today. I think Seattle are 27th in pressuring opposing QBs this season. If Russell Wilson is cooking, then Ryan Fitzmagic is going to be smoking. That's what we're going to see. The Seahawks rank second in points afforded to opposing quarterbacks. Now they've lost Jamal Adams, who, if you looked at how they used Jamal Adams last week, he was like a monster backer. You know, he was rushing the passer. He was covering tight ends. He was covering receivers. He could do anything. He was tackling in the backfield. Without Jamal Adams, I think Miami have got a little bit more time to do their stuff. They've got Devontae Parker, we talked about, Preston Williams. They've got a few nice little weapons in the backfield. I think this is a good game for Ryan Fitzpatrick. A couple of the guys have mentioned him already, but if he's on your waiver wire and you're hurting from Tannehill or Big Ben, whoever, go out and get Fitzpatrick, give him a go. At least it will be fun.
Yeah, that Seattle defense just cannot stop anyone through the air. The Dolphins are going to be chasing Seattle all day long. Let's talk about the running back position. Your choice there surprises me a little bit. There's a pass-catching back that really stood out to you. Who is it?
It's a desperation shot. We know that. But, you know, there are people out there who are really hurting because you're missing players through injury. And then the COVID situation came along. Obviously, last night when I saw that Saints positive test, I was very worried for what people's teams might look like. So I put J.D. McKissic in here. Now, I know Antonio Gibson is the fashionable guy to own in Washington's backfield, but J.D. McKissic is probably the guy to play right now. And it's going to be a tough game. But J.D. McKissic has run more routes. He's in for more snaps. And Haskins, while he is struggling, is going to be using that safety valve an absolute ton. I think Baltimore, great defense. But McKissic can pinch it for you today with 7 to 12 points. And that might be the difference between completely screwing up this week and salvaging a secret little win.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions about James White, right? I mean, if you're thinking about someone who's sharing a backfield, game status is still uncertain, even though they moved it to Monday night. J.D. McKissic can sort of match that, and he's not going to bring the same risk of having the game completely scrubbed. And, of course, Washington, a 14-point underdog against the Ravens today. Let's go to the wide receiver position. Where are you turning if you're looking for a wide receiver to fill in this week?
Well, I said originally I was going to go for Dontrell Inman if Terry McLaurin doesn't go. I had him as the emergency. But to be honest, I think you could still start him. He's been a spot start guy for years in San Diego. You remember him with Phillip Rivers. He finds soft spots in coverage. He has safe-ish hands. He doesn't have that breakaway speed. He's not going to rip the top off the defense. But Haskins has shown that he trusts this guy on third down. He trusts him in the red zone. With McLaurin playing, Inman's ceiling is probably what we saw from him last week, which I think was 15 points. And his floor is probably around 7 points. So if you're in a deep league and you've lost A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith, Deontay Johnson, Juju, Ebron, I don't know, whoever your flex guy is, I think Dontrell Inman can come in a deep league and he can hit for you today. And I'd say between maybe 7 and 15 points, you'd happily take that, especially the garbage time stuff is going to come right at the end of that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what you're looking for in Washington. Garbage time, indeed.
That's all they have.
That's all they have. Desperation plays at tight end. There are actually a few out there, and I think this is a good one that you've got lined up for us here.
Well, I heard the guys talking about Bobby Tonyan, but for me, it's got to be Jay Sternberger, the most targets of his career in last week's game. This Falcons defense, I think, as we saw against the Bears, is absolutely atrocious. It is not just soft, it's just terribly, terribly bad. And the Packers are missing some receivers, Alan Lazard. So you're looking for people who Rodgers trusts. That's always the key with the Green Bay Packers. You need someone who Aaron Rodgers trusts. I think we saw with the increase in targets that Jay Sternberger is getting, he was a good receiver at A&M. And I think that coming into this game on Monday night, it works for me. I like Jay Sternberg to maybe, get his first touchdown. If you remember, he dropped one in the playoffs last year, but this is a big opportunity for him on Monday night against the Falcons.
All right. So, and I got to ask before we let you go, what are some of your toughest decisions you got to make in your lineups this week, right? We spent a lot of time helping our listeners out. I'm just curious, like what decision or two are you wrestling with the most on this Sunday morning?
I've been waiting on the Terry McLaurin, DeAndre Hopkins news. That has come up quite nicely for me. I've lost Mike Williams. I did have a big decision between Antonio Gibson and CeeDee Lamb, but I'd be interested to hear what you would do with that situation.
Gibson and Lamb?
Yeah.
I like Lamb this week. I think that Cowboys-Browns game is going to be as advertised, back and forth, and I like the usage we've seen for Lamb early on. I just think if I can avoid Washington's offense other than McLaurin, I kind of want to do that because they could lay a complete egg. They could put up 10 points in this game, and it could just be completely ugly. So I'd go Lamb in that spot.
Yeah, I put CeeDee Lamb in. I think he's one of the players I'm most exposed to because I just loved his talent coming out of Oklahoma. I think he's probably the best offensive weapon, maybe the best receiver that Dallas have. I know that's sacrilege with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup there, and they're both darlings of the fantasy community in different ways. But CeeDee Lamb is an incredible talent, and I love what he's going to do. So probably going to slide him into my flex spot today.
All right. Well, good luck with your matchups today, Ed. We look forward to catching up with you again in Week 5.
Thanks, DVR.
That's Ed Mallion, latest installment of Brits Picks. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed that. We're going to have Matt Schneidman from The Athletic joining us here momentarily. We'll get the latest on the Packers with Matt. Of course, a ton to talk about there. Inactives flying by, of course, on the bottom of your screen. A lot of injuries that really shook things up this week. And, I'm looking at a few of these here. The Chris Carson situation, not having Carlos Hyde there is huge. Like, I think he's obviously a great play in season long, but in DFS, Chris Carson is borderline like must play for me. I think the work's going to be there. They're going to be protecting a lead consistently in this game. I think Chris Carson gets 20 touches really easily and can do a lot of damage against that Miami defense. Let's bring on Matt and get the latest on what's happening here in Green Bay ahead of their Monday night matchup with the Falcons. Do we have Matt? Matt is not here yet. All right, we'll get to Matt in just a moment. Let's grab a couple more listener questions if we have a few of those handy. We don't have those handy either. No, it's all good. Here we go. Team MZ wants to know, what do you think about Tyler Boyd for Week 4? Other than the pace concerns that Jake brought up earlier, I actually like Tyler Boyd in this spot. And thinking about this matchup, the Jacksonville pass defense really isn't that good. I think we're not playing that same game with Boyd that we're playing with the other two receivers, A.J. Green and T. Higgins, where we're just not quite sure how things are going to flesh out week in and week out. I think we've seen Tyler Boyd put up big numbers in less than ideal conditions. So I'm feeling really good about Boyd. I think he's a top 25 receiver pretty easily this week against Jacksonville. Let's bring on our buddy Michael Beller, since we didn't get to him a little earlier in the show. Beller, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. Just following along here, getting ready for Week 4 now, and all these injuries that we were worried about coming through on the good side. So it's been a tumultuous week, but hopefully Sunday, the early going here is a good indication of what we got ahead of us.
Yeah, so what we were going to talk about earlier, there were so many injuries, we didn't get to some of these players. There are a lot of interesting guys who are tracking downward in roster rate who might actually be worth picking up. And the one that I was surprised to see the most is Traquan Smith. He's down to 28%. I look at Smith, and I think he's just clearly ahead of Emmanuel Sanders at this point. I know Sanders scored against the Packers in Week 3, but even as Michael Thomas gets closer to returning, that's not happening in Week 4, but it might happen in Week 5. Do you go ahead and pick up Smith in leagues where he's available, expecting him to continue to have a steady role behind Thomas and behind Kamara as the Saints offense gets healthy?
Yeah, obviously this is all relative to what you already have on your roster, how deep your league is. I guess that sort of goes without saying. But I do think that Traquan Smith is clearly ahead of Emmanuel Sanders. The thing that has me a little bit concerned or doesn't really get my juices flowing for him is the fact that it sounds like Michael Thomas is going to be back for this team next week, right? He was almost good to go this week. We will now be, 4 weeks removed from that ankle injury next week, and that is as skinny of a tree as we have in the league. It's going to be Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Jared Cook does what he does when he's healthy, and that really could be it here. So I do think that once Michael Thomas is back, Traquan Smith really is a break glass in case of emergency play and not really more beyond that. Obviously, we're going to have some heavy bye weeks coming up. This week is showing us that anything can happen in this 2020 NFL season, but I don't think we're really ever going to look at Traquan Smith as someone who you are starting with any consistency outside of something going wrong or bye week, something like that with one of your teams.
Yeah, I see it that way too. And look, there's a couple other situations we might get to a little bit later in the show. Players dropping off in roster rate that might be interesting in stashing. But we do have Matt Schneidman, so we'll get back to chatting with you in just a few minutes, Beller. Matt Schneidman covers the Packers here at The Athletic, and there's a lot going on in Green Bay. So let's bring Matt on to the show. Matt, thanks for joining us this morning.
How are you guys doing?
Doing really well. Let's start with the status of Davante Adams. What is the latest on his expected availability for Monday night here against the Falcons?
Yeah, if there's one thing I've come to learn about Matt LaFleur, it's that he's not divulging anything about injuries until he absolutely has to. I get the sense that Adams will play tomorrow night. You know, when we asked LaFleur yesterday what the status is of Adams, he said, we got 53 hours until kickoff. We'll decide then. But I will say, Adams didn't practice at all leading up to the game against the Saints, and he was listed as doubtful. He practiced in a limited capacity every single day this week, so that would lead us to believe that he at least has a better chance to play. He told us on Thursday that he probably isn't 100% yet, and he's only going to play if he's 100% because he felt he rushed himself back a little bit too soon from a turf toe injury that cost him 4 games last season. But he said he's feeling a lot better this week than last week. And we haven't talked to him since Thursday, but on Thursday he said that, we'll see later in the week. So if I had to guess, I say he plays just because of the progress he's shown since last week.
All right, so things tracking in the right direction with Adams. Still probably a good idea if you're going to play him in fantasy to have a backup ready. You wrote a great piece about Darius Shepard for The Athletic this week, and if Adams is unavailable kind of unexpectedly, do you expect Shepard's role to increase with Allen Lazard going on IR?
Not too much to, make him worthy of picking him up. I would say Robert Tonyan is more of a guy that you should give a look at. I don't expect him to be owned in really many leagues. He's the Packers' #1 pass-catching tight end right now. Had 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown against the Saints last weekend, and that was with Lazard healthy. I think if Lazard and Adams are both out, you're far more likely to see Aaron Rodgers target Tonyan and Aaron Jones in the passing game than you are Darius Shepard. Darius Shepard might get a grab here or there, but in terms of a consistent pass-catching threat, I think Tonyan, Aaron Jones, even though he's not on any waiver wire right now, so Tonyan, Jay Sternberger maybe even would be guys that you'd want to look at.
Yeah, that was going to be the follow-up question. Do you think there are going to be any tactical adjustments, more 2 tight end sets, more 12 personnel on the field to possibly offset the rash of injuries to this group of wide receivers? Because this is a group that was thin to begin the season that has been really just decimated here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Mercedes Lewis is doubtful for tomorrow, and he's pretty much on the field for all of their running situations because he's their main run-blocking tight end. I know he caught a touchdown pass against the Saints last weekend, but I do expect a lot of 12 personnel. I think they're going to run the ball or at least try to give the facade that they're going to run the ball heavy. So I would expect to see a lot of Sternberger and Tonyan at least on the field. We've seen how effective the bootlegs and the play action has been for Aaron Rodgers so far this season. So I would say Tonyan and Sternberger are good plays. Tonyan more so than Sternberger. Sternberger had 3 catches for 37 yards last week. Rodgers doesn't quite trust him as much yet as he does Tonyan. So, like I said, if I had to pick one person whose stock is elevated because Allen Lazard and potentially Davante Adams are out, I would say it's Tonyan instead of a guy like Shepard or Marquez Valdez-Scantling even.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with Valdez-Scantling kind of being the #1 temporarily. We'll see how he stacks up against opposing teams' top corners here in the next couple of weeks, or at least perhaps this week if Adams doesn't go. Have you heard a timetable for Allen Lazard's return from that core muscle surgery? I think a lot of people are wondering if they should just hold on to him for a few weeks or if it's going to be a lengthier absence than that.
Yeah, it seems like it'll be lengthier. I know IR is 3 weeks minimum, but anytime, Schefter comes out with the report he's out indefinitely, it's probably not a great sign. I haven't seen Lazard at least. For example, Christian Kirksey, their inside linebacker, has a pectoral injury, and he's at least been at practice and rehabbing on the side. I haven't seen Lazard since Sunday, since his injury. He hasn't even been at practice. So I would expect it to be a little longer. For context, Geronimo Allison, the former Packers wide receiver, missed 11 games in 2018 because of a similar surgery. Greg Jennings missed 7. Demarius Randall, their former safety, missed 5. So I would say it's going to be longer than 3 weeks for Lazard. I don't know exactly how many yet, but if you have an IR slot on your roster, he's probably safe to go there.
Yeah, if you got the IR slot, definitely use it. If you only got one and someone else is already filling it, might be okay to let him go and try to pick him up again later in the season. One more question for you, Matt. Kenny Clark looks like he's at least got a chance to play on Monday night. And how much would his return fortify a run defense that's been very porous to this point in the season without him?
Yeah, it's pretty porous with him, too. So getting him in there will help that much more. We talked to him yesterday. He sounds like someone who is going to play. He returned to practice last week, practice limited last week, didn't play against the Saints, did the same this week. And talking to him yesterday, I'm pretty sure I could tell that the PR staff or the coaches got in his ear before he talked to us to be like, oh, it's their decision. But he says he feels good. He didn't say that he's going to play, but I've heard him talk a lot, and I've heard guys talk a lot about their status and not wanting to give anything away just because coaches and PR guys tell them that. But my guess is Kenny Clark plays this week, and I think that should do some good things for that defensive line, both rushing the passer and against the run game.
All right, we got one Packers-related question here. This comes from Michael. Can anyone help me for my wide receiver 2 spot? I'm stuck, and I don't know what to do. Allen Robinson, Valdez-Scantling, or C.D. Lamb?
Yeah, not Valdez-Scantling. I mean, he's not consistent enough. He'll cost you maybe 50, 60 yards in drops. So I would say Allen Lazard or C.D. Lamb over Valdez-Scantling, especially because we saw last week, and Valdez-Scantling tweeted this after the game, he got the 1-7 treatment, meaning without Davante Adams, the Saints covered Marquez Valdez-Scantling like they would have covered Davante Adams, and he didn't do anything on Sunday. So especially if Adams is out, I would say stay away from Valdez-Scantling.
Yeah, I think the floor and ceiling for Allen Robinson are just a little bit higher anyway, so I'd be comfortably using Robinson in that spot. Right. Matt, thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. We really appreciate your insight.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
That's Matt Schneidman. He covers the Packers for The Athletic. You can get all of Matt's written coverage, all of our written fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. And be sure to check out Matt's Packers podcast, Head of the Pack, with Bill Huber. Let's bring back Michael Beller, and we're going to talk about a few players that we like for Jock Market this week. Let's be sure to go to the App Store right now. Get the Jock Market app. You can start making money this week. The Android app is coming soon. Of course, as always, we are looking for players who are going to exceed expectations, finishing above their projected rankings for the week. So, Beller, coming out of the IPO stage this morning, who do you like at Jock Market?
Yeah, I've got a couple of running backs jumping off the page at me. The first is Daryl Henderson. This, I will admit, feels a little point chasey from last week after what we saw him do, but also he did do what he did last week and over the last 2 weeks, and now a game against this Giants defense that really doesn't scare anyone, a game where the Rams, are favored by just about 2 touchdowns. Depending on where you see it, it's going to be anywhere between 12.5 and 13.5, so this game script could work very well for him, and it really does feel like he's got a chance to run away with the Rams backfield. Maybe not entirely once Cam Akers is back, but certainly be the guy to the tune of handling 60 to 70% of the touches out of the backfield this week, all alone with Malcolm Brown playing whatever role he's going to play. Love that, and I also love Jonathan Taylor going up against the Chicago Bears. This is not the Bears defense that we are used to seeing, even just of recent vintage. This team has given up nearly 5 yards per carry to running backs here this season. Jonathan Taylor, obviously the focal point of that Colts offense, and no Eddie Goldman for the Bears this year. That has definitely been very obvious to watch. You can really run up the middle against this team, so I do think that Jonathan Taylor's set for another big day. Should be a good volume day for him as well. I think that game's close. I think that game goes back and forth, but Jonathan Taylor definitely set up for success against the Bears here this week.
Oh, I love Taylor. I love the first receiver you've got listed here, too. I mean, the Saints are missing Marshawn Lattimore. They're missing Janoris Jenkins. This looks like a fantastic spot for Kenny Golladay.
Yeah, how could it not be, right? You mentioned those two guys out of the lineup for the Saints. It's a good spot for Marvin Jones, too. I think you could talk yourself into really either of the Lions running backs and, for that matter, or Lions receivers and Matthew Stafford as well. But I'm going to focus on Kenny Golladay here because of the fact that he's just the best receiver on that team. It's another game that should be going back and forth, over-under in the low 50s. Depending on where you get it, you're going to see that anywhere between about 53, 54 points, and it's one that I think should play to script. What you like about Kenny Golladay and the Lions, too, is that we've now seen a couple of games for the Saints without Michael Thomas. they've been able to still pile up points. So it's not like this game should have any fears, I think, of hitting the under, or at least not coming close to that 53-54 number. Kenny Golladay should be able to absolutely abuse what is really a shorthanded Saints secondary. That's often been the strength of this team, really ever since they drafted Marshawn Lattimore, the strength of the defense. But without him, without Janoris Jenkins, I don't see any way that this passing game is slowed down today. I think that's going to be one of the high-scoring games of the day here.
Yeah, I love that for the shootout potential. We heard Ed Malyon talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick earlier. He's a great play, I think, on Jock Market today as well. I was impressed by Josh Allen last week against the Rams. Like we saw another level from him, really, making some throws that he hadn't necessarily made in the past. How do you feel about him going up against the Raiders today?
Yeah, really like Josh Allen. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is probably the guy to go after most aggressively on Jock Market because of the lower price you're going to get with him. But Ed already dove in on him, so I will move over to Josh Allen. If you are willing to pay up a little bit, because you're going to have to do it for Josh Allen, I am totally comfortable doing it. We've now seen 3 straight games where this guy has done everything you would really want of him. And something that, if you look at what he's done this season and maybe think this is someone who really is growing, is that he's not just doing it with his legs, right? We loved him as a fantasy quarterback last year and coming into this year because we knew whether or not there was growth with his passing game, the legs were going to be there. Well, the legs are now just sort of a side dish to the main course of what Josh Allen has given us this season. Stephon Diggs is proving to be the perfect acquisition for this offense and for this quarterback. Brian Daboll has totally changed their offensive identity, right? This is a team that now leads the league in usage of 10 personnel, 1 running back, 0 tight ends, 4 wide receivers. The Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, they lead the league with that sort of personnel, and that is just something we never would have expected out of a Josh Allen-led offense. He is making these huge gains, and I think that continues right here against the Raiders. And DVR, I'm going to stick in that game. I'll take us over to the tight end position. Darren Waller, I think, is going to be in line for a big game. We know about the injuries to the Raiders wide receivers, Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards. Darren Waller, even with those guys in the lineup, is probably the number 1 pass catcher. Feels like a great get-right bounce-back spot after the Patriots were able to take him away, right? Bill Belichick, the Patriots defense, they can do that. As good as this Bills defense is, I don't think they can do that. So I think Darren Waller bounces back in a big way for the Raiders, for fantasy players, and for anyone in that Jock Market app here today. So give me a whole lot of Darren Waller.
Yeah, and the Jock Market app is another place where I'm thinking about Will Fuller, too. A lot of boom-bust potential, but I'm hoping for the boom. I think the price is right if you want to get some shares of Fuller today with that matchup against the Vikings. Be sure to take control of your fantasy sports experience and download Jock Market now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. Let's bring back Brandon Funston and get to our fill-in-the-blank segment. This is a great one. I love this segment. My favorite segment every single week. First one. All right, I picked up Justin Jefferson, and now I'm blanking him. I feel like a game show host with this one right here. What do you think, Brandon?
I would say considering him. How's that? That's somewhere in between. It's all. I think he's at the point now where he's not ranked in my wide receiver as high as wide receiver 3 this week, but I think he's a flex consideration. It's all about context of your roster and who else you have around him. But I would say he's a borderline top 40 play at wide receiver. And so, mileage may vary depending on, how he's rostered across the leagues.
What do you think here, Beller?
Yeah, I think considering is a great way to put it. I would say maybe getting excited about, if I can add a few more blanks in there too, because I really think that this is someone who could develop into a consistent starting fantasy receiver. I wouldn't put him there yet. Adam Thielen obviously is going to be a volume guy. Dalvin Cook takes a ton of touches off the boards for the wide receivers, or at least for their potential. But this is a team that really might struggle defensively all season. We've seen it through 3 games, and we might be seeing it all year. And if that's the case, we've seen enough from Kirk Cousins this year that it doesn't feel like they're helpless in games where they get into shootouts, right? I mean, that game week 1 against the Packers, they fell way behind, but they still put up 30-plus points. Last week against the Titans, they got to 30-plus points again. So they can put some points on the board. And if he is having to throw the ball as consistently as we've seen in some of these games, then Justin Jefferson's target share, even if it doesn't approach what we see from Adam Thielen, is going to be large enough to potentially turn him into a regular starter. So definitely getting excited about him if I've got him on my rosters.
Got a few questions rolling in. I got some in the chat, too. Shout out to MCN Patches for answering questions on our YouTube channel, just bringing that sense of community. So we really appreciate you, MCN Patches. Question here from Jason that we're going to answer. Start Adam Thielen or Michael Gallup for your second receiver spot, please and thank you. What do you think, Brandon?
I think you go with Adam Thielen. And look, I think that the thing about Michael Gallup, and you have to look at this Dallas deep receiving core and decide what kind of game it's going to be. Well, you look at Cleveland, they've given up a lot to the slot receiver. They've given up a lot to the tight end. They hurt you over, you can hurt them over the middle, it seems like right now. So to me, this feels like it's not a Michael Gallup game. It's more of a CeeDee Lamb game. You know, Amari Cooper will get his, but I think it sets up better for Adam Thielen this week.
All right, let's get to our next fill in the blank. I have T. Higgins, Evan Ingram, and Robert Tonyan with my flex and tight end spots open in a PPR league. I am starting blank and blank. We'll go to you first, Brandon.
I am starting T. Higgins and Robert Tonyan, and we heard Matt Schneidman talk about Tonyan. I'm on Team Tonyan then this week. Evan Ingram has been a bit of a mess, just like the rest of that Giants offense. I like Higgins being looked to in the red zone, and really, you look at Tonyan and Higgins. I think the touchdown upside is just better with both of those two. So I would go ahead if I'm going to risk it on guys that are kind of in the periphery. I like people that I can imagine have a decent chance of scoring a touchdown.
Now we got a question here from Mitchell, Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, or Devin Singletary, and he has to start two. What do you think here, Beller?
Yeah, you know, I hate sitting any of these guys down, so this is a decision made with gritted teeth, but I would probably sit on Devin Singletary out of those two guys. It would help to know what the PPR situation is here, but with what we've seen from Mike Davis, it's really hard to sit him down. And Kenyon Drake, I think that Arizona offense is in a really good spot here today, and while he hasn't had a breakthrough game just yet this season, there's been no real shenanigans with Chase Edmonds. That has been the Kenyon Drake show out of the backfield. He completely owns it. He's the cleared lead runner. The reception upside isn't quite as high with DeAndre Hopkins on the field. Last year, you know, we saw some big catch games out of Kenyon Drake after he was traded over from Miami, but still getting so many touches that it's basically impossible to sit him down. So I'll go Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, and have a pit in my stomach about sitting Devin Singletary.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good knowing that a guy that touches the ball 15 or so times could take it to the house from anywhere on the field, because that's the big playability that Devin Singletary brings each and every week. Our next fill in the blank, week 4, Dion Lewis is blank rated. We'll go to you first, Brandon.
I love this one. This is a shout out to Chris Liss, who taught me this word, defenstrated, which means to throw out an open window. Back from the medieval times when they would throw you out the castle window. Deion Lewis hasn't been the right answer since 2017, so throw him out the window this week.
Would you kindly cut Deion Lewis from your rosters this week based on the situation in that Giants backfield, Beller?
Yeah, Brandon said it all. I mean, I don't even want to try to compete with that. There's no reason to have Dion Lewis on your team. If it was going to happen for him, it would have happened last week. They're just going to get Devontae Freeman more and more involved, and that could just be also a helpless and hopeless offense. So I don't see any reason why you should be holding on to Dion Lewis at this point.
Well, we got a question here from Gareth in a half-point PPR league. Needs to fill the wide receiver 3 spot. Jarvis Landry, Hunter Renfrow, Brandon Ayuk, or Justin Jefferson. Those are some nice options. What do you think, Beller?
Yeah, those are some nice options. I look at Landry and Renfrow, I think, as my top two here. And I'm going to lean toward Jarvis Landry here. I know we haven't seen a huge game from him just yet this season. We really haven't seen a big game from this Cleveland passing game. This is the week where I start to get concerned about him. If they can't get things going against a Dallas team that, A, the offense is going to force you to get things going, we know that, and B, the defense really hasn't slowed anyone down, then I start to get a little bit more concerned about Cleveland's passing game than I am through 3 games. So I do think we see Baker Mayfield's best game of the season. I think we see a nice game out of Odell Beckham, but that half PPR is going to be nice. I like Jarvis. Entire career has always delivered in PPR context. So give me Jarvis Landry. I do think Renfrow is a nice play here as well, but I'm going to give the nod just to the guy who I think is purely the better player. That for me, Jarvis Landry.
Thinking about a Baker Mayfield Brown stack since last night, that might be the extra little nudge I need to go ahead and commit and throw another $10 into the pool for this week and hope that Baker and that passing game gets right against the Cowboys. It should be a nice shootout, though, in that matchup. Next fill in the blank is Andy Isabella will have blank yards on blank targets. What do you think, Brandon?
I will go 57 yards on 3 catches. So he was 47 and 67 yards his last 2 weeks. So I just split the difference and said 57. So there you go. Andy Isabella is a complete wild card. But one thing you can say, again, I talked about this earlier. The injuries to the other receivers raises his ceiling a little bit. And the more targets Andy Isabella gets, his ceiling is considerable on each of those targets because he's a big playmaker. And you'd love to roll out Andy Isabella if you knew he was getting a full complement of snaps. I don't think we're there yet, but I think you can feel a little better than usual about the workload he will get today.
Chill will. Hopefully he can stay calm as he watches this one play out. Ronald Jones or Josh Kelly in the flex spot, full PPR, looking for the better option of those two. What do you think, Beller?
I think it's got to be Ronald Jones, right? We don't want to trust Ronald Jones when Leonard Fournette isn't on the board, but with him off the board, I do think we can feel pretty good about him. Really not knock on Joshua Kelly whatsoever. I don't have anything negative to say about him. Obviously, PPR isn't the best context for him, but this is just more Ronald Jones being left alone in a Tampa backfield. We've got the Buccaneers favored by a touchdown. No Chris Godwin available. It feels relatively easy to me to get Ronald Jones in here.
And you got Vita Vea in that Tampa defense. I mean, the way Josh Kelly runs, the way they use him kind of, between the tackles a lot, like that's just the Tampa defense is a death sentence for that. So I'm in complete concur that it's Ronald Jones.
All right, our next fill in the blank, coincidentally, is a Bears question that will go to Michael Beller. The Bears backup running back I'm picking up is blank. The Bears, of course, lost Tariq Cohen for the season. So
many options, Beller.
Yeah. Should we go Lamar Miller here?
After the practice squad.
Getting him to the practice squad? I mean, listen, look, I'll say this. If anyone is going to make an impact, I think, behind David Montgomery, Lamar Miller's got the best chance to do it. Cordell Patterson is a nice piece for the Bears in real life because of what he can bring to the offense, what he makes defenses think about, but he's never going to get the sort of touches that you feel good about throwing him in your lineup. Is Cordell Patterson liable to take a jet sweep of some sort and bust a 65-yard touchdown at some point this season? Sure, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but how many games is he going to touch the ball more than 6 times? It's just really not going to happen all that often for him. So Tariq Cohen has a unique role in the offense. Just because he has this role doesn't mean that someone automatically steps into it, because there really is no one on this Bears offense who is capable of filling that role. There's just no one who matches that skill set. So I think this is more a matter of the Bears changing what they do offensively a little bit rather than a one-for-one replacement for Tariq Cohen and what he does here. So really, it's, I think, a big boost for David Montgomery. Just have to imagine that his already high touch load is going to increase even more the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. In really deep leagues, like fishbowl type leagues, Lamar Miller is the way you want to go if you want to throw a dart behind David Montgomery at this point. Pedro's got a quarterback question for us. Drew Brees or Joe Burrow? That's actually a really tough call for this week, because I think Burrow's matchup against the Jags, as we talked about earlier, really stands out. How do you want to attack that one, Brandon?
I'm going to go Joe Burrow. I think he's top 10 on the year. I know the pace with Jacksonville is a little bit slower, but I don't think this is a worse than average matchup. And so I have Joe Burrow ranked as an upper half quarterback. And the one thing about him is he's not a statue like Drew Brees. And so there is some ability for him to get out and run and give you a little extra on the ground. And without Michael Thomas, I'm still out on Drew Brees being like having a lot of upside in fantasy. I think he's probably, his upside is now middling at best without Thomas, even against Detroit. And look at Jeff Okudah back there in the secondary. This Detroit passing defense is going to get better and better and better each week.
Over under in that game is 53. Lions are 3-point home underdogs. It should be back and forth at least. It is important to point out over unders across the league are up. 53 is not quite the eye-popping total that it would have been in previous years. So keep that in mind too, of course, as we're looking through those. How about one more fill in the blank? Will Fuller will have a blank game than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Let's go to you, Beller.
I'm just going to take the layup here and say better. He's going to have a better game than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's going to have a comfortably better game than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's just a better player. He's in a better spot. He has a more important role in his offense versus what MVS does in Green Bay. Even with Allen Lazard out, it just feels too easy to go in this direction rather than any other one here. So I'm not going to overthink it. I know Will Fuller burns us when we're expecting big things from him, but we can't let the past inform what we see right in front of us with Will Fuller. And what we see is a really nice matchup, a spot where he can still be the wide receiver one for Houston, a game where I think we're going to see a lot of back and forth between Minnesota and the Houston Texans. I'll be right there with you. I already have a little money on that game going over. So let's go Vikings. Let's go Texans. Let's put some points on the board. But I think Will Fuller is a nice play here today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of love for Will Fuller on this show outside of Jake Seeley. I think he's a little
Get
nervous.
rid of Jake. Get him out of here.
No, we need Jake. Jared writes in, Henderson or David Johnson in a half-point PPR. Love the show. Thanks for the help. What do you think here, Brandon?
Yeah, it's got to be Henderson's been rolling, averaging over 100 yards the last 2 weeks, and you get the Giants, and you still have Cam Akers out. David Johnson, a nice first week, but, he hasn't really been huge on the volume and isn't kind of impacting the passing game yet as much as I thought he would. I think I'd ride the hot hand in a decent matchup with Daryl Henderson.
All right, next one comes from Aiden. Hunter Renfrow or Terry McLaurin this week. What do you think, Beller?
Yeah, Terry McLaurin, no question about it. These are two guys who just operate on different planes. Renfrow is a nice backup to Terry McLaurin when we thought Terry McLaurin could potentially be inactive this week, but that's really why you've got him there. You do not compare these two guys to one another. Give me Terry McLaurin easily. Could Renfrow outproduce him? Of course he could. Anything's possible, but we're talking about a 1 in 5 chance, I think, at best. Terry McLaurin, just a flat-out better receiver, more important to his team. Terry McLaurin 10 times out of 10 with this discussion.
Let's keep things rolling. Question from Aaron, half-point PPR, John Brown or Preston Williams in the flex spot, Brandon?
Look, Jake's the biggest Preston Williams fan out there, and I am not. I think he's overrated by Jake, but listen, I can't deny this matchup against Seattle. I think Preston Williams is a better play, especially since John Brown wasn't 100%. We had some questions about whether he's going to play. It looks like he's going to play, but given his health and given the matchup for Preston Williams, give me Preston Williams.
All right, James on 215 in a PPR league. Hunt, Chark, or Thielen? I'm assuming only one, but we can rank them real quick, maybe just to stack them all up. What do you think, Beller?
Yeah, talk about a pit in your stomach after benching a couple of these guys. I mean, I want to play all three of them. I have to sit two of them? I can't even just sit one? I'll go Thielen, Chark, Hunt. Thielen's target load is huge. Chark's target load should be big as well. Jake mentioned the pace concerns for Jacksonville, and Chark, over this injury probably, but still in the back of your mind. Kareem Hunt, obviously, PPR context is great for him, but Nick Chubb could be in line for a big game as well. So I'll put him in the reverse order of how we see him listed on the screen. Just really, again, that Houston-Minnesota game, it should go back and forth. Adam Thielen should get double-digit targets, and just a dangerous enough weapon that he's my favorite guy out of these three.
Yeah, let's file that under a good problem to have. Mitchell weighs in with Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, or Devin Singletary. He has to start two. I think we saw this one a little earlier.
Yeah.
This one looks familiar.
What's funny is, you went. I would add that I had the other two switched. So I said definitely in my mind when you were answering that, I was like Kenyon Drake's the starter, and I had Mike Davis and Devin Singletary switched. I had Singletary ahead of Davis, but they're so close. I think this is one of those ones. It's your fantasy team. Throw in Kenyon Drake and then play your gut on one of the other two. In my mind, they're very close. So go whichever direction you'd rather.
Yeah, it's a really tough call. Now we got a question from Cyrex. It's common problem with Terry McLaurin this week. Why do people want to sit Terry McLaurin? He's playing. He's fine. Preston Williams is the alternative here. I mean, Brandon, you just said you think Preston Williams is overrated, so I know you're definitely going McLaurin. Is it McLaurin for you too, Beller?
Absolutely. Again, this is just Terry McLaurin is on a different plane from Preston Williams. And that's not a knock on Preston Williams, although I agree with Brandon. We do a couple of podcasts a week with Jake, and it's like, Jake, we get it with Preston Williams. We get it, man. We get it. You love him. We get it. Let's not talk about him for a week. Terry McLaurin is just on a different level than what Preston Williams is. Bottom line, Terry McLaurin is just one of those guys who, when he plays for Washington, he plays for you.
Continues to do it in suboptimal circumstances as well. Let's get to our survivor picks for this week. There are a few huge favorites on the board, so if you haven't used those teams yet, you've got some reasonably easy choices, or what look like reasonably safe choices at least. How do you want to go about it this week in Survivor, Beller?
Yeah, I am alive in my survivor pool still. 3 easy weeks so far, and I think this is another one where I'm just not going to overthink it. I'm going to take the what feels like the layup choice here with the Los Angeles Rams. This Giants team against a shorthanded San Francisco group playing their backup quarterback last week just looked like maybe the worst team in the league. And yeah, sure, maybe that's an anomalous one-off performance, but now we're talking about playing a very good Los Angeles Rams team, full strength. They have looked excellent this year. That game is a 2-touchdown favorite for the Rams. The Ravens are another good choice too, but this is a great spot to use the Rams. Going to be popular. Pot odds could lead you in another direction, but for me, I'm going to take what feels like the very easy selection and go Los Angeles Rams across the board in my survivor pools.
Is that your top choice as well, Brandon?
It would have been my top choice. Since Beller took it, I would say the Ravens are probably my number 2 choice. Tampa was probably my number 3, but outside the Ravens and the Rams, man, it would have been a tough week if you'd already burned those 2 teams and you had to choose another one. I think all the other games are going to be you can at least see them being contentious. So yeah, I'll take the other layup then, I guess, with the Ravens.
Yeah, I keep looking at the Giants, and I do like them from a DFS perspective. They're going to have trouble running the ball. They're going to have to throw it to keep pace. I think Daniel Jones could have one of those games where he throws it like 45 times, gets picked off a couple of times, but if he finds 300 yards and 3 TDs and you stack them up, it can be a good day DFS-wise. I just have a hard time seeing them being good enough to pull off the upset against the Rams today, and Washington looks hopeless against the Ravens. I mean, this is a Ravens team that is a little frustrated, I think, coming off their game against the Chiefs on Monday night. So a reasonably easy survivor week. Let's get to our final question of the week, our last big question from our listeners. We'll try to help as many people as we can each and every week. This one is from Sal. In a PPR league, this is a really tough question to go out with, so I'll give you both a crack at it. In a PPR league, Joe Mixon or Ronald Jones? You can go first on this one, Beller.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think there are strong arguments, right? These are not default arguments. These are good arguments to get both of them in your lineup. I am going to lean toward Joe Mixon. I think that they need to start getting him a little bit more involved in that passing game. And even though we haven't seen that willingness just yet from Zach Taylor, we still see a very high touch floor every single week. And while we do trust Ronald Jones without Leonard Fournette in the game, we know that it takes one play, right? It takes one fumble. It takes one missed block, which Ronald Jones is actually pretty good at. It's one way. You cross Bruce Arians, you do not get a second chance to cross him in that same game. So I think that there's a little bit more risk tied to Ronald Jones. I'll go Joe Mixon. I like the Bengals to win that game too against the Jaguars. So I think Joe Mixon will have a big hand in that.
What do you think, Brandon?
I'm gonna double down on Joe Mixon as well. And again, we talked about the pace for Jacksonville that could work to Joe Mixon's advantage. If this is a lower scoring, tightly contested affair. I mean, Joe Mixon's always a good bet for 20 plus touches, but it makes it even more so. And I don't see Ronald Jones getting that kind of workload no matter what happens. I could see Ronald Jones GMs cursing LaShawn McCoy's name at some point today. So, it's just kind of the way it is with Bruce Arians right now.
Yeah, 3 for 3. I like Mixon a little bit more too. That volume's better consistently, and just a few less ways it can really fall apart. I think we know Ronald Jones can absolutely let us down. Sal's going with Mixon. We hope he finds the end zone a couple times.
Hope it works, Sal.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, this is going to wrap it up for week 4. Hard to believe we're a quarter of the way through this fantasy football season as well. I hope you guys enjoy the games today.
Yeah, you too,
yeah.
DVR.
Enjoy it today and enjoy a doubleheader tomorrow night. Let's hope. Cross some fingers, knocking on wood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want that Monday night doubleheader to happen for a ton of reasons. Hopefully, we have seen the worst of COVID as it pertains to the NFL and can contain these outbreaks and keep things rolling along. That is going to wrap things up for our Week 4 episode of the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market. Take control of your fantasy sports experience and download Jock Market now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. As always, be sure to get all of our written fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. For Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, Michael Beller, Matt Schneidman, and our man behind the scenes, Nando DeFino, I'm Derek Van Riper. Thanks for watching. Good luck in Week 4.